we're doing stock selection, it's a question of what quantitative model we actually use to drive the selection process. There's two basic ways to proceed. The first way would be to conduct a sorting algorithm. This algorithm will look at firm-specific characteristics and sort firms into portfolios based upon these characteristics. For example, we might take a look at the so-called value effect by sorting all firms in a particular month based upon the book-to-price ratio. All firms with a low book-to-price ratio would be considered value stocks. We hold those firms, let's say in the top 10%, for 1 month, and then resort again by book-to-price. Now, in principle, we could do this for many different factors and come up with a composite portfolio that included the stocks that scored the best in terms of these sorts. Now, there's another way to proceed, and that is with a cross-sectional predictive regression. So in this case, we would be regressing the stock returns in a particular month on lagged characteristics that are available, I guess, at the end of the previous month. We would have regression parameters. We would multiply the parameters by the current values of the characteristics, get forecasted values for the cross-section of stock returns, and then presumably pick off again the top 10% and hold that, or call that the buy portfolio. And the bottom 10% we might sell short and call that the sell portfolio. So sorting and regression give us two different strategies for selecting securities. The question is, which one is best? And indeed, perhaps this is an empirical question, and a lot of it has to do with how you implement these two models. If I'm running cross-sectional regressions on stock returns versus attributes every single month, I know in advance that the parameters that I'm estimating will change through time, potentially leading to inconsistent portfolio strategies. For example, in 1 month, if it's the case that the value stocks did less well than the stocks that are considered non-value stocks, then the next month, the portfolio strategy would basically put all non-value stocks into the buy portfolio. So what happens in 1 month is going to spill over into the next month in terms of the regression-based strategy. Now, in previous lectures, we've actually gone through methodologies to try to reduce the chance that something like that would happen by attribute adjustment on a firm-specific basis. But nevertheless, the multiple regression approach will lead to some inconsistencies through time. Sorting approach, it's got positives and negatives just like the regression approach. The question is, how do we actually execute the sort? If we're doing a multivariate sort, which would mean sort on one characteristic like price to book, and then sort the price to book portfolios on another characteristic such as earnings momentum, what is the order that we do the sorts? The orders will determine what the portfolios actually look like. Or is it the case that we do kind of univariate sorts, one based on price to book, one based upon earnings momentum, and then somehow put them together? How do we calibrate the model in sample and out of sample? There's many questions that arise with sorting. There are positives and negatives. I guess the way that I think about it is that sorting destroys some information in the stock returns, in that the returns or the attributes are reduced to ranks from top to bottom. And some people say, well, why would you ever want to do a sorting approach? Because you reduce the information. So instead of having the actual values of the attributes associated with the firms, we have a number which represents a rank. I guess my view of this is that sometimes if there's a lot of noise in the data, that is optimal to actually reduce or coarsen the information. And a rank type of analysis might be very valuable in actually doing this. So my opinion is that it's not necessarily the case that regression is better than sorting. And it's not necessarily the case that sorting is better than regression. Both techniques have merit. And indeed, the sorting could be cast within a regression framework, a very special regression called a multinomial probit. Really what we have to do is to empirically test. And when you actually do the empirical test, and I've done this for a few countries, that there really isn't that much difference between the regression-based approach and the sorting approach. So what I usually recommend is to go with the approach that is maybe the most easy to implement and the most intuitive. The most popular approach in terms of investment management might be the large-scale regression-based approach. However, a number of firms, a number of very large firms, use a sorting-based approach to evaluate the characteristics of expected returns on many different securities.